Kyle Lowry was incredible in the fourth quarter, doing everything he could to fill in for Jimmy Butler, but it wasn't enough as Miami lose their third straight game. We'll have your breakdown coming up next.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Friday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However you may be listening via YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app, thank you so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. This episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to all of our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. Miami was on a back-to-back in Los Angeles after an overtime loss on Wednesday. Yes, time is completely lost meaning here. An overtime loss to the Los Angeles Lakers. Another late night for Heat fans and for, obviously, your Locked On Heat hosts. And unfortunately, this one was just as thrilling, though, but a 112-109 loss that came down to the final seconds without Jimmy Butler, who injured his ankle against the Lakers. Kyle Lowry had to take over, dominated the fourth quarter, scoring, 22 of his points there in the fourth quarter. Incredible effort from him. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough as Miami fell short to the Los Angeles Clippers, a very good defensive team who came up with some big plays down the stretch. This was a very odd game, Wes, because it started going to Bam Adebayo early on. He was, if not the story of the game, certainly a big focal point early on. But then towards the tail end of the game, it just seemed like he was no longer a part of the team's offense. I don't know if you accredit it to the Clippers defense, but he took 9 shots in total in the first quarter, dominant performance, and then just 9 the rest of the way through 3 quarters of play. Did you see anything there in Bam Adebayo's game that you think limited his touches? Because he was so engaged early on, looked like the aggressive version of Bam that everybody's looking for, and completely dominating. We talked about this in the pregame show. We thought it might be important to go to Bam early on with Jimmy's absence. They did that in the first quarter and then just completely went away from it.
Yeah, it was strange, wasn't it? Bam looked so dominant early on, and I think part of that was just Bam doing kind of what he did in the third quarter against the Lakers, where it was just sort of taking control of the game, being aggressive. And I thought the key was that almost every one of Miami's possessions that Bam was on the court for, Bam touched the ball. And then as the game went on, Bam wasn't involved in the action as much. Even if he wasn't the guy scoring, shooting at the basket or anything like that, he wasn't the hub of the offense like he was earlier on. I want to give credit to the Clippers defense before we start on the analysis here, because I thought that they were awesome. This is a team that came into this game winners of 5 straight games. They've now won 6 straight games, and that defense has been absolutely incredible for them. The weak side help by guys like Nick Batum and Paul George is just on another level. You've got Zubac has taken a leap in his own right too, and he's become an awesome rim protector for them. And I think his size gave Bam some problems down the stretch of that game. But I think also partly it was just the Heat being a little disorganized and not really knowing what they wanted to do. Eric Spoelstra said in the postgame that was pretty much the case. Like, they really couldn't figure out how they wanted to go about scoring until the fourth quarter, and Kyle Lowry took over. To your point, though, like, you were scoring just fine in the first quarter. You had 40 points in that first quarter, and it was like 33, 35 in the second and third quarter combined. Like,
Yeah.
I think it was part of them just getting away from it, as they have over the, historically with Bam. Like, sometimes you get away from it. And I think some of it's got to go to the Clippers defense.
That's a good point. Yeah. 40 points in the first quarter, as you mentioned, and then 38 through the second and third combined. And a lot of that has to do with the team's depth. That did get a boost with a welcome return of Max Strus in the lineup. He had an okay game, knocked down his first 2 3-pointers, then went just 2 of 8 overall from the field, 2 of 8, all of them from 3-point range. Fell in love with that shot a little bit too much. And on a night when the Heat were shooting just 22% from 3-point range, he needed to capitalize on those a little bit more. Eric Spoelstra said he liked his minutes. He liked his ability to bounce back after missing a couple weeks of play. He's got to pump up his players a little bit, but I think it was a pretty disappointing night overall. 9 of 41 from 3-point range. Just Eric Spoelstra said it. They didn't have a lot going offensively. I think the exact quote was, they didn't have a lot going offensively. Just kept it going with a lot of grit and timely shots. Some of those coming from Bam in the first quarter, some of those coming from Tyler Herro, and then a lot of those coming from Kyle Lowry, who we should mention was, in the words of Eric Reed, magnificent in the fourth quarter. Just a fantastic game, doing everything. Defensively, stealing the ball, making plays for others, drawing fouls, shooting timely shots. And a night when everybody was kind of writing him off because his shot had been struggling, he turned it up to a complete Hall of Fame level, as we know he's capable of.
Traditional point guard stuff, right? You feel out the game, you get guys involved, or at least you try to in the first 3 quarters or so, and then in the fourth quarter, you start scoring. Like that is, Isaiah Thomas, Magic Johnson, like in the line of historic point guards. That's kind of what Kyle Lowry did there. You gotta give him credit. 22 of his 25 points in the fourth quarter. He scored like 11 straight for the Heat at some point to get them back into that game. Doing it by driving to the basket, which is something that he did so often in Toronto. He was one of the leading drivers in the league with the Raptors. He's not been driving as much with the Heat as he's a little bit more perimeter oriented, kind of facilitating handoffs with Bam, with Duncan, getting the ball to Jimmy Butler, getting it to Bam Adebayo in the post sometimes and stuff like that. But without Jimmy Butler and tonight, Jimmy Butler's still very much getting to the basket this season with Miami when he's healthy. Without Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry kind of took that on and started getting to the basket. And I think he figured something out there in doing that, because the Clippers guards were scoring really well, but they're not necessarily great defensively. And I think he was able to put pressure on them.
What play in particular, he was like matched up against was it Isaiah Hartenstein, and he refused to drive on him, and then he wound up pulling up for a fadeaway jumper, which he knocked down. But it stood out to me because right away I was like, well, that's not great that he can't drive against a slow 7-footer. And then, well, he was going up against Zubac. He was going up against everybody in the fourth quarter and able to get to the rim the way that, again, he thought we could. I tweeted something about it, and the response came that he had been I think he had 9.7 drives per game last season in Toronto. So a lot of people were writing it off as, oh, he's older, he can't get to the line anymore or get to the rim anymore. But 9.7 last year, just 5.3 this year. So a huge drop off in that regard. Just maybe, as you mentioned, just no longer incorporating that into his offense as he's kind of trying to feel his way through everything else. Anything else really stood out about? Yeah, go ahead.
I think the Heat need to figure that out. But no, nothing really stood out from the game. We should talk about the final play, at least the inbound pass. They had an opportunity there. Duncan Robinson, I know we're going to talk about him later on in the show. Some really big opportunities late to basically win this game for the Heat. And just like against the Lakers, he just really couldn't pull through. We'll talk about that later. But that ended up resulting in an opportunity for Miami to at least try to tie the game on an inbounds play. I thought it was a really interesting design by Spo. You had Kyle
Tucker.
And then you had Tyler Herro kind of darting from one side of the of the court, and then you had Kyle Lowry starting on the baseline, and then you had Bam Adebayo and Duncan Robinson sort of planted in the middle, setting down screens kind of in the opposite directions for their guys darting around. I was curious to see where they were going to go with it. They ended up trying to get to Lowry with it. PJ Tucker lobbed it over Bam Adebayo, and then Nick Batum just made an incredible play on it. Like, I don't even know how he saw it, honestly. Like, he reached out with his limb. Maybe he got lucky. I don't even know what it was, but he knocked the ball away, and then he never got a chance to tie the game. So the comeback after the Clippers comeback falls short. But overall, this is not a sky is falling loss. I guess that's my major takeaway when we zoom out on this thing, David. This is not a sky is falling loss here, because when all things are considered, I understand the Heat have lost 3 straight. The Denver loss was bad, but I think that one was also, they haven't won in Denver since 2016. You kind of That's when you sort of when you get the schedule at the beginning of the season, you're like, all right, that's probably an L. And then with 2 back-to-back games at Staples Center, you lose to 2 good teams on back-to-back nights in games where your best player, Jimmy Butler, played just 1 quarter. And on the second night of back-to-back, you get a really great effort down the stretch. This is not a sky is falling loss. The Heat have lost 3 straight. They're not going to be number 1 in your power rankings on ESPN or NBA.com anymore. But none of that stuff matters. I still think that when Jimmy Butler comes back, this is still a really good team. They have things that they need to figure out. But like I said, the sky's not falling here.
Well, we will talk about Duncan Robinson later on the show. We'll also be giving out our report cards for some of the key performances from the game, as well as checking in on some of Nostradamus's predictions from earlier in the week, just to check in now that we're wrapping up the week and see how he did. But first, a reminder that this episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. It's always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food, a place where friends and families can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries or McFlurries, win or lose. It's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's a place you can always look forward to stopping to on a long road trip to rest your legs or refuel. You know, we've all gone to McDonald's at some point. It's a great place for families. You always see a bunch of families there. And I love driving around, going on road trips. When I was driving in between Gainesville and Orlando to cover games, it was always fun. Or even when we're taking trips down to Miami, you always know there's a McDonald's there, and it's always a reliable place that you can count on. You know the food's always going to be great. I always enjoy stopping there and seeing other people along the way. I know you did as well, Wes, but head down to your local McDonald's to refuel, reconnect. Did somebody say Locked On Heat watch party? And I am loving it. And then a reminder that we're back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Use our promo code Locked On to get that bonus. From basketball, football, baseball's postseason, the NHL, boxing, and so much more to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts, and don't forget to use that promo code Locked On.
All right, boys and girls, it is time for some player grades. That's right. It's time for report cards. And the first one, David, has to go to Kyle Lowry. And Kyle Lowry is going to get a big fat A. I'm going to tell you why it's an A, but first I'm going to tell you why it's not an A+.
Okay.
I understand that he had an incredible fourth quarter, one that Eric Reed went so far as to call a miracle, which was maybe a little bit of an overstatement, but it has to, like, the first three quarters matter, and he scored 3 points in those first three quarters. 22 points in the fourth quarter. If this was a fourth quarter grade, this would be an A++++, whatever. Maybe one of those fake letters that Elon Musk names his kids after. But as far as the first three quarters, it wasn't great. And you got to think, like, if he was better in the second and third quarter, maybe the Heat don't give up that lead in the first place. So I'm going to give it an A because the fourth quarter was so incredible, and because without Kyle Lowry, this ends up being a blowout and an embarrassing one. And we're not even, and now we're talking about a sky is falling type of loss here. But I'm comfortable giving him an A.
I understand. I mean, I think it kind of, it doesn't diminish what he did. Like an A+ is fine, whatever. We're kind of just picking at nits here, but the reality is that he had a fantastic night. Just took over the game. A lot of people were kind of scratching their head and wondering, well, who's going to fill in for Jimmy Butler? And Kyle stepped up so admirably. Being, look, I'm as guilty of it as anybody. I was, sending out tweets and saying, Kyle just completely dropping the ball. The shot wasn't falling, not getting to the rim, and then all of a sudden, just completely takes over. As dominant performances we've seen in a Heat uniform from anybody, from a LeBron James to a Dwayne Wade or anybody else, Jimmy Butler in the finals, this was as good a performance as we've ever seen. 22 points in the fourth quarter, a lot of that late in the fourth quarter too. And just taking over the game, fantastic performance from him. But my first player grade goes to the player who dominated the first quarter. That's Bam Adebayo. Fantastic game from him as well. Maybe not magnificent, maybe not a miraculous game, as Eric Reed would say, but a pretty good one. Look, 12 of 18 from the floor, 11 total rebounds, a block shot, and a steal. 30 points from him, 6 of 8 from the line as well. A game that would deserve an A, but I have to kind of give it an incomplete. I don't know if that's within the rules of what we're doing here, but to me, it just feels like he could have had that transcendent performance if they just kept going to him. And I know we talked about in the first segment that maybe a lot of people, could have, maybe the Clippers did a good job of shutting him down, but I think that he kind of tended to go away from them as they do at times, and not to their help. I think it really was detrimental to their success because it just seemed like it could have been an easy score to go to Bam, use his skills as a playmaker to get other guys some open looks. Instead, it kind of took over a little bit as hero ball, a lot of one-on-one ISO type situations, and not running through Bam as much as they had in the first quarter.
Giving Bam like a B-, but with one of these arrows that are going down, because had he done what he did in the first quarter, A+++, and then what he did for the rest of the game was basically a D.
Yeah,
I didn't love, and so I guess the average of that is a B-. I'm not actually a teacher, despite the bow tie and the glasses, but I couldn't. We talked about it at the beginning, and I can't wait to go back and watch the film on this, David, because I have no idea what happened there.
Yeah.
I have no idea what happened because he was so dominant in the first. He still ends up finishing with the team lead in points, but so dominant in the first quarter, just MVP type of play from him, right? All that all NBA first team, that no ceiling potential that we know he has. And it's like, man, he just shows for entire quarter. It's not just flashes. It's not a couple of possessions that he strings together. It's
No.
entire quarters, whether it's the first one against the Clippers or the third quarter against the Lakers, just entire quarters where he could just do it. And then he just doesn't do it for the rest of the game. I don't know if it's a substitution thing, the guys that he's on the court with.
A little bit.
I can't figure out what it is. Like I said, I want to go back and watch the film, but something's got to give here. I don't know if it's a little bit too much my turn stuff in this Heat offense, which I'm starting to notice a little bit
Yep.
too often.
Yep.
But I agree with your assessment. Like it was a weird game, and so I used arrows and you used other letters that don't really count.
Fair enough. So who's your last player grade for?
Well, I don't think that his performance was especially interesting, but he's worth talking about, and that's Max Strus because he's missed the last handful of games out with injury, and he made his return tonight. He was the third player off the Heat's bench. They actually went to Caleb Martin and Gabe Vincent before they went to Max Strus. And just as a quick aside, Gabe Vincent, some really, really good minutes, but you hate to see him be relied on that much. That was not good. And in that second quarter, he was also kind of there's not a lot of offense happening there. Kind of the reason why they weren't able to play. Duncan Robinson got into foul trouble, and they had to go to Gabe Vincent in that backcourt. Anyway, I'm gonna give the opposite of an incomplete. You've got or whatever. You've got pass fail, right? I'm gonna give him a big P. This is the worst P ever because I'm kind of turning it from a C into a P. But I'm going to give him a pass in a good way. Like, he came out, he hit his first 2 threes on back-to-back attempts. Everybody's like, oh, boy, Max Strus, he's ready to go. That's the three-point shooter that they needed.
Yeah.
Then missed the next 6 straight. So, whatever, 6 points, 4 rebounds, a steal, a couple turnovers, played 17 minutes. Didn't really make a major impact on this game, but it was just nice to see him back out there.
Yeah, that's fair. And look, you talked about it before that on a typical night, when Kyle Lowry doesn't explode in the fourth quarter the way he did tonight, or Duncan is struggling the way he did throughout the whole game, and we'll talk about that in the next segment, it's always good to have a reliable three-point shooting option. Unfortunately, Strus wasn't quite that, but he does stretch the floor. He does provide some of that same gravity that Duncan can't, at least in theory. I think he can be an impactful player. He had some nice minutes, well, like we said, was complimentary of Strus's performance, but needs to be a little bit more consistent with that shot. If you're taking 8 3-pointers, 20%, it's not going to cut it. So you've got to be a little bit better than that. 25, excuse me. But we will talk about Duncan in the next segment because his struggles were pretty much dominating the conversation around the game.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to our Nostradamus prediction recap, all coming up next. But first, we got to talk about Built Bar. I love Thanksgiving, all the good food, the treats, plenty of them, but maybe you want a yummy dessert that isn't so full of calories and sugar. That's a perfect time for Built Bars. Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end. Most Built Bars are only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. I'm having a hard time reading this with these fake glasses, David. Replace the coconut cream pie with coconut Built Bar or go to a raspberry Built Bar. Instead of that raspberry pie, lots of good flavors to replace any pie. Low calorie, low carb, low fat, high protein, covered in 100% real chocolate. So it's tasty too. Built Bars are a great option for when you're hungry. If Thanksgiving isn't coming soon enough, go for a Built Bar or 2 right now. Share some at your family gatherings. It's going to make things a lot less awkward. Maybe Aunt Betty hasn't tried a Built Bar yet. That's a conversation starter. New surprises all month long. Limited time flavors arriving at Built.com regularly. So make sure you check out the site often. There's nothing like a Built Bar Black Friday. Mark your calendar for that. Black Friday will be a huge event with all sorts of surprises. So instead of spending money on something you don't need, just get your protein bar situation all set with Built Bars. Go to Built.com. Use that promo code LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off on your next order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com.
Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskHelloHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. As always, you make sure that you follow us over on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, leave us comments, and always you can submit questions that way as well. We love getting feedback on the show. Thanks to so many of you who have checked in during the week, even on a tough week like this when we're struggling, to stay awake and watching these games. It's always great to be able to engage with our incredible listener audience. But before we talk a little bit about the struggles of Duncan Robinson, and believe me, they're certainly worth talking about, let's check in on some of those predictions that Nostradamus had from earlier this week because, well, not a great week for Nostradamus. Kind of
Nope.
0 for 3, yeah. 0 for 3 in his first week, but that's what happens, when you look into the great beyond, sometimes it's not always as clear as you'd like it to be.
Yeah, not a great debut for Nostradamus. I thought it was a really good segment idea. I thought I would nail these predictions, and it looked good early on this week. David, Jimmy Butler come out strong against Denver. I predicted a season high. Nostradamus, that is, predicted a season high in points. Before that Nuggets game, his season high was 36. He ends up finishing that game with 31 points. So it wasn't totally. It's not like he came out with a clunker. He actually had a nice game. Wasn't quite the season high that Nostradamus was predicting. He did predict a loss to the Nuggets, so that was correct. Also predicted that Duncan Robinson would snap out of his shooting slump.
Right.
I would say that was not quite right there, and that Russell Westbrook would attempt at least 10 threes against the Heat. Russell Westbrook only attempted 7. So not if you were looking for a lane for prop bets, probably wasn't the way to go. If you were looking for a lane for wins and losses, I don't know that I predicted the LA games. I don't think I did, but I did predict that Nuggets loss. So at least there was a win there for Nostradamus. But I think Nostradamus will be back on Monday to give it another shot.
I think so. Look, part of this is, it's always fun to make these kinds of predictions, or in your case, seeing from beyond and tapping into the great mysteries of the universe. It's I don't think anybody envisioned an 0-3 start to this road trip, a 5-game road trip. Obviously, they've still got matchups on Saturday against the Utah Jazz. They wrap it up on Monday against the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Jazz game is going to be interesting. It's a 5 p.m. start here Eastern time. Rudy Gobert involved in an incident with Miles Turner in his game tonight, so that should be interesting. Oh, also, quick shout out to David Locke for hooking up Donovan Mitchell with those Locked On Podcast Network t-shirts. Donovan looked pretty good in those t-shirts. I mean,
you look better than me in the shirt.
Yeah, but he should wear a Locked On Podcast shirt from now on every time he's at the podium.
We gotta get somebody on the Heat in a Locked On shirt. I'm not sure who would wear it at this point, but
Duncan. But I'm not sure.
Use the luck. Speaking of Duncan,
yeah, great segue there. I mean, as clunky as every shot Duncan took there. We're kind of bagging him on him a little bit here, and unfairly so. Mostly playing to the reaction of our listeners and Heat fans in general, because he did finish 2 of 13 from the floor, 6 points, 2 of 11 from 3-point range against the Lakers, missing a key layup, missing a couple of rebounds, free throws, etc. So that looked particularly bad. Tonight, not quite as egregious. At least those particular things didn't stand out, but he made other mistakes. He did have 2 crucial blocks down the stretch. He played really, really good defense on Zubac. He blocked his shot at the rim. And then something that I thought was encouraging was that he really wanted to take the shot down at the other end. Kyle found him with the ball in the corner, took the 3-pointer. It rimmed out, unfortunately. But the fact that Duncan was kind of willing to take that shot in a night when he had been at that point, I think 2 of 9, somewhat encouraging. I don't know what else to say about the Duncan Robinson situation. Not to go all crotty here, but the reality is that we don't have any answer. He's not going to say that he's not quite comfortable or that he's out of rhythm or something like that. Spoelstra was asked about it. His post-game presser kind of just shrugged it off. He's like, you know what? This happens to great players. This happens to everybody. You've kind of got to just find a way to snap out of it. The pressure's on Robinson. I'm sure he feels that more than anybody else. The looks were there. The shots just aren't falling. Did you see anything else that really stood out? I know you've talked about it before, and I know that you've got a piece coming up on the West Side that you want to, kind of get into more details about it. But anything else that you think from Duncan's performance?
Well, yeah, I've got my weekly observations at the West Side. There's a bit about the Duncan Robinson struggles, and part of it is that there are very different looks that he's getting this year, and a lot has already been written about and made about how those dribble handoffs, the looks off of dribble handoffs, have kind of been
Right.
replaced with catch and shoot attempts. And that's definitely part of it. But the larger part of it is that he's just not moving around the court as much or as quickly either.
Hmm.
And that the on NBA.com, you can actually see how many miles per hour that they travel on offense, and his rate is down quite a bit. What
Hmm.
that says to me is that his decisiveness is down. It's not necessarily the action of shooting off of a dribble handoff versus the action of shooting a catch and shoot attempt. To me, the dribble handoff, those were scripted plays where he knew that he was just gonna like flash above a screen, get a handoff from Bam, and then launch it. There was just a decisiveness to it. There was an action to it. There was an impact to it. And now it feels like with all the isolation and the less dribble handoffs that the Heat are running in general, he's more like just he's kind of like a slot wide receiver operating against his own defense, just trying to figure out where the openings are. And that's
Hmm.
why the movement isn't there as much, and then why he's moving a little bit slower. He's picking and prodding because he has to, and he's just having a hard time finding his spaces. So again, I have a video breakdown on that in everybody's inboxes who are subscribed again to the website. So please do check that out. But the other thing that doesn't mean anything when it comes to those late clock, end of game situations where he's got clean looks for a three. He had that one at
Yeah.
the end, David, and it was just you were just so rooting for that one to go down because he
Yeah.
had the opportunity to basically win the Heat the ball game and erase this entire slump and just put it away and hit a game winner here. And it just wouldn't go in. And you could just see him, man, just so dejected, going back to the sideline, throwing a water bottle at one point. Like you really feel for him. And you could just feel that frustration bubbling,
Oh yeah.
right? And that just doesn't work when you're a shooter, when you just wanna go lights out, and you just don't wanna be thinking because I don't care how mentally strong you are, it is how do you not think about that before every single time you hoist a three-pointer where you're just like, "Well, I really sure hope this one goes in." And
Right.
that's just enough of a little bit of a glitch to maybe, make that thing go a little bit too far to the left or the right or too strong or too short or whatever it is.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. I think it's partly mental, but I
Yeah.
think
Oh,
that mental
without a
fl
doubt.
that meant whatever that mental block is, I think was caused by just the change in the offense and the change in his role overall.
Yeah, that partly what players, especially a player like Duncan, and we've talked about this and we've seen this from shooters in the past. They need to understand their role on the court. They have a very clearly delineated one that they have to follow very precisely. And when there's any kind of deviation from that, it's hard for them to find that kind of rhythm because so much of shooting is all about the same repeatable actions, right? And for Duncan, the offense has changed because of the addition of Kyle Lowry, the addition of PJ Tucker, and the different roles that Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo are playing. So for Duncan, it's not the same offense. It's not the same position he's been in. And look, a lot of Heat fans will continue to trash him. You and I have talked about this before. We've been pretty consistent about it. When he turns it around, and eventually it will come because he'll figure it out, because he'll understand exactly how to find his place and his footing within that system, then we can all kind of forget about this and just kind of just shrug it off. And a lot of people are also criticizing him for not developing his game so much. And to that point, I will say, no one cares. Not to be rejecting your conspiracy theories or theories in general, but the Heat don't want him to do anything differently. It's not why they throw $90 million at him. They didn't
No.
pay him to be a guy who can attack the rim. They already have somebody like that in Jimmy Butler. What they want Duncan to do is shoot and shoot and shoot, and to take as many of those shots as possible and hope that
He
a
took
lot of them
11
fall.
tonight. He
Yeah,
took
I
11
mean,
tonight, and I think I remember asking, Spoelstra the other a few games ago about it,
right.
and he's like, "How many shot attempts did Duncan had?"
Yeah,
And
less
I
than
told him
15,
11,
right?
and he goes,
Yeah,
"You should have taken 15." And
right.
that's it, and that's the only if you're a coach, that's the only thing you can say to Duncan Robinson. We were asked the other day in our live chat, or a live recap of the Lakers game, what can Eric Spoelstra say to Duncan Robinson? We actually never got to the question, but it was in the chat. Um, there's nothing you could say. Just keep shooting. And his teammates got to tell him keep shooting. And they got to keep passing him the ball. And to their credit, they are. He's got the opportunities. Eventually, it's going to go down. Eventually, it's going to fall.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, tough start to this road trip, but again, they'll be taking on the Utah Jazz on Saturday. We'll see if they can duplicate some of that magic. So far, no updates regarding Jimmy Butler. I would expect him to probably play, but of course, it's very hard to predict how an ankle can turn out. At the same time, as much as we'd like to see him out on the floor, you don't want to aggravate that injury because you need him down the stretch. It's almost better to just sacrifice the game without Jimmy and try for the best and see if maybe Kyle can have another incredible, miraculous performance just as he did today. But that'll do it for us on today's episode and for this week here on Locked On Heat. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every day. Make sure you check out Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. We'll talk about that Utah Jazz game on Sunday when we record our next episodes. You'll have it ready and available for you on Monday. Again, make sure you subscribe to us on all platforms, especially on YouTube or via any podcast app that you listen to us. This is David Ramil signing off for now, and thank you so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.